Fallout 4's world is full of stories that most players only glimpse, tucked away in quiet corners of the Commonwealth. Many of its most haunting details don't come from the main quests, but from the vaults hidden beneath the ruins. These underground shelters weren't just designed to preserve life, they were designed to test, manipulate, and exploit the people who trusted Vault-Tec with their survival. Each vault carries its own shadowy story, and in Fallout 4, several of them reveal obscure secrets that often go unnoticed. Vault 75 lies beneath Malden Middle School, and unless a player explores every room, it's easy to miss just how dark its purpose was. Children from the school were ushered into the vault during the bomb's descent, separated from their families, and told they were safe. In reality, Vault 75 was a eugenics experiment. Scientists separated parents from their children, executed the adults, and subjected the children to years of physical and mental testing. The goal was to create a stronger generation, bred and trained for war, their lives nothing more than data points in Vault-Tec's cruel design. The vault is littered with test logs, medical records, and haunting reminders of what happened. Many players never realize the full scope of the atrocities because the story is hidden in terminals and notes rather than spelled out directly. Then there is Vault 81, located near Chestnut Hillock Reservoir, one of the rare vaults that appears functional at first glance. The residents live normal lives, trading with outsiders and raising families. But Vault 81 hides a secret chamber sealed away from the rest of the vault. Its true experiment was to expose residents to diseases in order to test experimental cures. Deep inside the vault's restricted wing, the player discovers a hidden lab, long abandoned but filled with clues about what happened. The only thing that prevented the vault's population from being destroyed was the Overseer's refusal to follow through with Vault-Tec's orders. It is a chilling reminder that not every Overseer was complicit, but the design itself was meant to sacrifice human lives in the name of research. Vault 95 offers another obscure layer of tragedy. Built as a rehabilitation center for people struggling with addiction, it was stocked with chems as part of its experiment. After several years of sobriety, a stash of drugs was introduced into the vault to see how quickly the population would relapse. Unsurprisingly, the community collapsed, tearing itself apart in violence and despair. The vault is later discovered by gunners who take it over as a base, but the remnants of its original purpose still linger in logs and recordings. Many players pass through it simply as another combat encounter, never uncovering the full extent of its cruel history. Fallout 4 also teases Vault 114, accessible during the Unlikely Valentine quest. Hidden beneath Park Street Station, this vault was designed as a satire of social hierarchy. Vault-Tec filled it with political elites, wealthy businessmen, and influential leaders, but assigned them no staff or support structure. The vault was intended to collapse under the weight of egos and incompetence, a social experiment designed to see how long the best of society could survive without guidance. By the time the player arrives, the vault has long since failed, its empty halls taken over by gangsters. Unless players dig into the logs, the satirical intent of Vault 114 is easy to miss. Even Vault 111, where the player begins, hides its obscurities. While the main story reveals that cryogenic suspension was the vault's true purpose, scattered terminals provide subtle hints about the Overseer's growing paranoia and the engineers who knew they were dooming the residents. The idea that families signed up for protection only to be turned into unwilling test subjects sets the tone for the rest of the game, but many players rush past these small notes in the tutorial section. Those who linger discover the full extent of Vault Tech's lies before ever stepping into the sunlight. The vaults in Fallout 4 aren't just dungeons to clear, they are museums of cruelty, each one reflecting a different aspect of Vault Tech's philosophy. Vault 75 shows the exploitation of children. Vault 81 demonstrates how science can be corrupted by secrecy. Vault 95 exposes the futility of rehabilitation when sabotage is built into the system. Vault 114 satirizes the arrogance of the elite. Vault 111 is the betrayal of trust on the most personal level. Together, they form a chorus of stories about control, manipulation, and the collapse of humanity's hope for safety. These details are rarely delivered through flashy cutscenes or direct exposition. Instead, they exist in half-broken terminals, forgotten holotapes, and the environmental storytelling that Bethesda weaves into its worlds. A skeleton slumped in a chair beside an unfinished experiment, a recording of someone begging to be released, or a journal entry written in despair. These quiet moments carry the weight of Fallout 4's lore. They reward players who slow down and look closely, but they can be easy to miss, hidden behind locked doors and optional exploration. The obscurity of Fallout 4's vaults reinforces one of the series' central themes: safety is an illusion. The bright yellow numbers painted on jumpsuits and the cheerful advertisements promising security hide a reality of exploitation. Vault Tech wasn't preparing humanity for survival, it was dissecting humanity in the name of science and power. For players who uncover these stories, the vaults are not just backdrops, but warnings about trust, authority, and the fragility of civilization. And as players leave each vault, stepping back into the open world, the weight of those stories lingers. The Commonwealth above may be dangerous, filled with raiders, mutants, and feral ghouls, but at least it is honest in its brutality. The vaults, with their sterile walls and hidden experiments, remind us that sometimes the worst horrors don't come from bombs or monsters, but from the institutions that promise safety in the first place. Behind Fallout 4's sprawling Commonwealth lies a shadow world of content that never made it into the final release. Development on a game of its size inevitably leaves behind experiments, prototypes, and abandoned ideas, and many of these remnants can still be found within the game's files or hinted at in scattered details. For players who dig into the data or explore every corner, Fallout 4 offers a glimpse of what could have been quests, characters, and features left on the cutting room floor. One of the most striking examples is the series of cut quests related to the Institute. Early drafts suggested the player would have been able to rise through the Institute's ranks in greater detail, taking on missions that emphasized its technological ambitions and moral compromises. While the final game allows alignment with the Institute, many of the smaller story beats were streamlined or abandoned. Unused dialogue suggests entire side plots about synth research, secret missions, and rivalries between Institute divisions, but these remain hidden, only accessible through cut files. Another planned storyline involved the Railroad. As one of Fallout 4's morally ambiguous factions, they already carry a weight of secrecy and sacrifice, but cut content reveals that the Railroad might have once had more internal conflict. Hints suggest that splinter groups existed, disagreeing on how best to help synths. Players may have originally been able to exploit or reconcile these divisions. Instead, the Railroad's final version is more streamlined, focused on its central mission without the messy politics that often make Fallout's factions so compelling. The Minutemen, too, had more planned depth. Preston Garvey's endlessly repeating settlement quests became a meme in Fallout circles, but evidence suggests that Bethesda originally intended for a broader variety of tasks. Files hint at more unique missions tied to rebuilding specific areas of the Commonwealth, rather than the often repetitive, "another settlement needs our help." The ambition was clear: to make the Minutemen feel like a grassroots movement. In the end, much of this was pared back, leaving players with a sense of repetition that overshadowed the faction's hopeful message. Some quests never made it out of testing. Unfinished markers point to stories involving Diamond City's politics, with more involvement from Mayor McDonough and his paranoia about synth infiltration. While the final game hints at his corruption, cut content suggests a deeper conspiracy questline was once planned. Players might have had more choices in exposing or even manipulating the mayor's secrets. Instead, the storyline is more subtle, requiring sharp observation to notice at all. Even companions had trimmed storyline. Codsworth, the player's robotic butler, has unused dialogue that hints at more commentary on the Commonwealth, as if Bethesda once intended for him to serve as a guide to the region's history. Similarly, Strong, the super mutant companion, has cut lines that expand his search for the milk of human kindness, a vague quest that in the final game feels unresolved. These fragments suggest Bethesda's ambition to give every companion a more robust arc, though time and development limits likely prevented their full realization. Beyond quests, Fallout 4's files are filled with mechanics that never made it into gameplay. Early design notes suggest more extensive underwater exploration. The Commonwealth's lakes and rivers hold secrets, but much of the underwater space feels underused. Evidence of cut enemies and structures beneath the waterline implies Bethesda once considered making aquatic exploration a larger part of the game. Players can still glimpse this in scattered treasures on the seabed, but the dream of a fully fleshed out underwater wasteland never came to life. Crafting also had more planned depth. Hidden notes suggest that Bethesda experimented with weapon maintenance and degradation, a mechanic that had existed in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. In Fallout 4, this was streamlined into mods and customization, but traces of older systems remain in the files. Similarly, armor layering and clothing combinations were once more complex, with early designs showing greater freedom in mixing outfits with armor pieces. The final version pared this down to maintain balance, but the traces of something broader are still there for modders to uncover. Some cut creatures also linger in the data. Files reference scrapped enemies such as giant insects, mutant variations of existing animals, and even early versions of the Radstag that behaved differently than the final game. Many of these designs were likely abandoned due to balance issues or technical constraints. Others may have simply been too bizarre, breaking the delicate tone of Fallout's mix of humor and horror. Still, the thought of what might have been adds mystery to the Commonwealth, a reminder that its ecosystem could have looked very different. One of the strangest remnants involves the Pip-Boy. Early builds suggest there were once plans for more interactive features, such as minigames tied directly into the interface or expanded use of holotapes. While the Pip-Boy remains one of Fallout's most beloved icons, Fallout 4 ultimately limited its functions to inventory, stats, and the occasional arcade-style holotape game. The idea that it could have been an even deeper tool reflects Bethesda's ambition, even if practicality forced a simpler design. For players who never dig into the data, these obscure facts remain invisible. But for those who explore cut files, modding communities, or the nooks and crannies of the game's world, Fallout 4 feels like two games layered together, the one we play and the one that almost was. Together, they create a sense of haunting possibility. What if the Institute had more internal strife? What if Diamond City's politics had unraveled in front of us? What if the Minutemen had truly been a diverse movement instead of a repetition of chores? The fact that so much of this cut content is still visible in dialogue fragments, unfinished markers, and hidden assets makes Fallout 4's world feel even larger than it already is. It reminds us that no game of this size is ever truly complete, that beneath the polished surface lies a skeleton of ideas, half-built and abandoned. And for players who want to imagine alternate versions of the Commonwealth, those scraps are enough to spark endless speculation. In a way, these cut features mirror the wasteland itself. Just as the Commonwealth is littered with the ruins of a world that once was, Fallout 4's files are littered with the ruins of a game that could have been. Both are haunting, both are fascinating, and both leave us wondering what lies just beyond the walls of what we can see. Fallout 4 is filled with dialogue, thousands of lines recorded for main quests, side quests, random encounters, and simple idle chatter. But buried within this ocean of words are small gems that most players never hear. Bethesda tucked away countless bits of character interaction, unique responses, and obscure recognition triggers that only appear in rare circumstances. These lines make the Commonwealth feel alive, even if many players never realize they exist. One of the most famous examples involves Codsworth, the robotic butler who greets the sole survivor after emerging from Vault 111. Bethesda programmed Codsworth to recognize over 900 different names, recording unique lines of dialogue so that he could greet the player personally. If you name your character something common like John, Sarah, or Alex, Codsworth will happily say it aloud, but he also includes more playful options like Grognak, Booger, or even certain developer in-jokes. It's a small detail, but for players who stumble upon it, hearing their chosen names spoken makes the world feel that much more personal. Nick Valentine, the synth detective with a noir personality, also has rare lines that many players miss. If you bring him along during certain quests, he comments on the Institute with unique bitterness, reflecting his history as a prototype synth. In the quest Dangerous Minds, where the sole survivor explores Kellogg's memories, Nick delivers extra dialogue about what it means to experience another's thoughts, something most companions cannot relate to. These subtle lines deepen his character, but they only appear if you have him by your side at the right time. Strong, the super mutant companion, is often remembered for his quest to find the milk of human kindness. While his search never reaches a clear resolution, he has hidden lines triggered in rare circumstances. For example, if you visit certain libraries or find specific books while he is in your party, Strong will make comments about knowledge, reflecting his dim but persistent curiosity. He even reacts to some unique consumables, complaining or praising depending on how human he sees the behavior. These lines are easy to miss, but make him more than just a brute companion. Curie, the robotic-turned-human companion, has some of the most tender hidden dialogue. If you spend time traveling with her, after completing her quest to transfer into a synth body, she occasionally expresses awe at simple things like touching raindrops or feeling sunlight on her skin. These small comments often happen during exploration, not tied to specific quests, so they're easy to overlook. Yet for players who take the time to wander with her, they reveal just how profound her transformation truly is. Piper Wright, the fearless reporter of Diamond City, also reacts in ways many players don't expect. If you take her to certain settlements, She comments on their conditions, often comparing them to the struggles of her own city. During Brotherhood of Steel missions, she sometimes voices concern over their authoritarian methods, foreshadowing her broader views on freedom and truth. Few players take companions to every possible quest, but when they do, Piper's sharp eye and opinionated personality shine through. Even Preston Garvey, often criticized for his repetitive settlement requests, has hidden lines tied to faction quests. If you side against the Minutemen or make choices that weaken their influence, Preston's disappointment surfaces in rare bits of dialogue. Most players only remember his famous line about settlements needing help, but tucked away in the code are pieces of story that reveal a more complex leader, one struggling with hope, trust, and the burden of responsibility. The Institute's courser, X688, has hidden dialogue that rarely surfaces because fewer players bring him along as a companion. His lines reveal a great deal about how coursers view both humans and synths, offering insight into the Institute's control over its creations. In certain locations, he reacts with disdain, while in others, he reveals admiration for technological relics. Traveling with X6 makes the Institute feel more fleshed out, but many never see these interactions because of the late point in the game where he becomes recruitable. Beyond companions, Fallout 4 hides obscure interactions in the world itself. Certain NPCs recognize the player's actions long after quests are completed. If you assassinate a faction leader, settlers or travelers may gossip about it, even if you never mention it directly. Merchants sometimes comment on rare weapons you carry, like the Fat Man or unique legendary items. These small acknowledgments don't alter the story, but they reinforce the illusion that the Commonwealth is aware of your presence. One of the strangest bits of hidden dialogue involves Kellogg, the mercenary who plays a central role in the main quest. If you enter his house in Diamond City before triggering the related quest, Nick Valentine and other NPCs have unique reactions, warning you that you shouldn't be there yet. It's Bethesda's way of accounting for curious players who explore too early. Similarly, bringing different companions to the final confrontation with Kellogg changes the flavor of the dialogue, though most players only see it once per playthrough. These obscure lines highlight Bethesda's attention to detail. For every major questline, there are dozens of small possibilities tucked into the code, companions commenting on a landmark, NPCs whispering about your choices, or robots recognizing names most players never think to try. While only a fraction of players experience them, their existence makes Fallout 4 feel deeper and more alive. Even in a game criticized for simplifying dialogue compared to New Vegas, the sheer volume of hidden interactions shows how much effort went into making the Commonwealth responsive. In the end, these secret pieces of dialogue remind us that Fallout 4 is more than just scripted quests and battles. It is a living tapestry of voices, each one waiting for the right condition to be triggered. Whether it's Codsworth calling you by name, Curie marveling at her new humanity, or Preston revealing his doubts, the hidden lines bring texture to the wasteland. They may be obscure, but they are part of what makes Fallout 4's world so endlessly replayable. Fallout 4 is a game filled with the obvious power armor suits, standing tall in museums, miniguns mounted on vertibirds, legendary deathclaws waiting in ambush. But beneath these headline features lies a quieter layer of treasures. Obscure weapons, unique clothing, and hidden holotapes are scattered across the Commonwealth, often tucked into corners where only the most curious wanderers will ever find them. These items are more than tools for survival. They are stories preserved in objects, Tokens of the World Before the Bombs, or sly winks from Bethesda's developers. One of the most beloved of these is Grognak the Barbarian's costume. Hidden in Hubris Comics, the ruined office of a pre-war publishing company, the costume can be found behind a locked door surrounded by memorabilia. Wearing it gives the player a boost to melee damage, letting them channel the pulp hero of Fallout's in-universe comic books. Alongside the costume are Grognak comic issues scattered throughout the world, each one providing permanent stat bonuses. Many players stumble across one or two, but collecting them all requires careful exploration, and the reward is both functional and symbolic. The fantasy of stepping into the shoes of a pre-war legend, the experimental Merv, is another treasure, though far more destructive. This unique variant of the Fat Man launcher can fire multiple mini-nukes at once, creating an explosion so massive it often kills the user as well as the enemy. It can be acquired by completing the Big Guns, Big Fun display puzzle in the National Guard training yard. Because of its extreme power and absurdity, the Merv embodies Fallout's mix of dark humor and spectacle, a weapon so over the top it becomes more of a novelty than a practical tool. Many players never complete the puzzle, leaving this chaotic toy undiscovered. In a similar vein, the Cryolator is an obscure weapon that most players see in Vault 111, but cannot access early in the game. Locked in a case behind a master-level lock, it sits tauntingly in the Overseer's office as you make your escape. Most players leave it behind, assuming they'll return later, but clever players discovered they could command Dogmeat to fetch it, bypassing the lock entirely and acquiring one of the game's most powerful early weapons. This trick spread through the community, becoming one of Fallout 4's most famous exploits, though many casual players never knew it was possible. Holotapes also serve as obscure treasures, hidden in terminals, desks, or on the corpses of forgotten survivors. Beyond quest-related recordings, Fallout 4 includes collectible holotape games that can be played on the Pip-Boy. Titles like Red Menace, a Donkey Kong parody, and Grognak, The Ruby Ruins, a text-based RPG, are delightful Easter eggs tucked into the wasteland. Finding them is optional, but they reflect Bethesda's playful streak, turning the Pip-Boy into a miniature arcade. For players who collect every tape, the Commonwealth becomes a scavenger hunt, not just for survival, but for nostalgia. The Silver Shroud costume is another obscure gem tied to one of Fallout 4's most memorable quests. Hidden in Good Neighbor, the costume lets players roleplay as a pre-war radio superhero, complete with dramatic one-liners delivered in conversation. While the questline itself is fairly visible, the full potential of the costume is easy to miss. If the player keeps it equipped during later missions, unique dialogue options remain available, letting them fully embrace the role of vigilante long after the quest is over. This subtle detail rewards players who commit to roleplay, turning a quest item into a long-term identity. Another subtle collectible is the Cabot House artifacts. The Cabot family storyline reveals a strange blend of science fiction and Lovecraftian horror, centered on an ancient alien artifact that grants near immortality. Completing the quest rewards the player with the Gamma Gun, a weapon that fires bursts of radiation. But within the Cabot House itself, smaller notes, diaries, and trinkets reveal the depth of the family's corruption and obsession. Many players rush through the quest without stopping to read, missing the obscure layers of storytelling baked into every object in the house. Bethesda also tucked in nods to pop culture through obscure items. The general's uniform, found in the castle after completing certain Minutemen quests, resembles classic military garb and references the sole survivor's rise to leadership. The railroad provides the deliverer, a silenced pistol modeled on the Walther PPK from James Bond films. Nuka-Cola Quantum, glowing bright blue, is both a gameplay collectible and a cultural wink to Fallout fans who followed its history across earlier games. Each of these items is easy to overlook, but adds richness to the Commonwealth's culture. Some of the rarest items are unique melee weapons. The shish kebab, essentially a flaming sword built from motorcycle parts, is one of Fallout's most iconic crafted weapons, returning in Fallout 4 with a fiery flourish. The Rockville Slugger, a baseball bat that consumes fewer action points in VATS, is hidden in Diamond City's baseball memorabilia store. Even more obscure is Pikmin's Blade, a serrated knife hidden in the lair of Pikmin, a serial killer whose questline most players miss entirely. These weapons aren't just tools, they're tied to characters and locations that tell darker stories about the wasteland. Magazines are another layer of collectibles that many players never fully pursue. Titles like Tesla Science boost energy weapon damage, while U.S. Covert Operations Manual improves sneak abilities. Each issue provides a permanent buff, but finding them all requires scouring nearly every corner of the map, from remote shacks to irradiated ruins. Because they're scattered so widely, most players end a playthrough with only a handful. Yet for those who track down every last issue, the Commonwealth reveals itself as a library of hidden bonuses disguised as pulp entertainment. Together, these obscure items transform Fallout 4 into more than just a game of survival and combat. They are treasures hidden in plain sight, waiting for players to slow down, explore, and notice the details. A comic costume in a ruined publishing house, a mini nuke launcher that defies reason, a holotape game tucked into a forgotten desk. Each is a reminder that the Commonwealth is not just bleak, but playful, layered, and endlessly surprising. For players who look past the obvious, Fallout 4 offers a second game beneath the surface, one built of secrets, stories, and obscure rewards. One of Fallout 4's greatest strengths is its environmental storytelling. The Commonwealth is littered with small details, from graffiti and hidden messages to carefully placed skeletons that tell silent stories. These aren't tied to quest markers or flashy cutscenes. They're quiet moments, waiting for observant players to notice. For those who take their time, the world whispers secrets about the lives lost before and after the bombs. Many of these details are obscure, overlooked by players rushing from one quest to the next, but they form the texture of the game's world. Take the graffiti scattered across Boston. In several areas, faded spray paint points toward hidden caches, often marked with arrows or simple symbols that suggest a scavenger's system of navigation. Some markings even reference factions. Stylized railroad symbols mark safe houses and paths, while crude skulls or warnings suggest raider territory. These details aren't explained outright, but players who pay attention to them find subtle hints of the Commonwealth's underground networks. Diamond City, the heart of the Commonwealth, is filled with small touches that flesh out its culture. The baseball theme, for example, isn't just cosmetic. Graffiti around the stadium references Boston Red Sox history, while merchants comment on pre-war baseball in ways that parody misconceptions about the sport. Dugout Inn, with its quirky ghoul owners, Vadim and Yefim, hides tiny details like old posters and bottles that remind players the bar was cobbled together from scavenged stadium debris Even the placement of lights and shacks tells the story of a city desperately built on top of a ruin. Skeleton placement across Fallout 4 is another layer of silent storytelling. Near a playground, a skeleton holding a teddy bear slumps against a slide, suggesting a parent's final moments with their child as the bombs fell. In an abandoned house, a skeleton lies in a bathtub with an empty bottle of pills nearby, a haunting suggestion of despair. In another location, two skeletons rest side by side in a bed, holding hands. These small environmental stories aren't highlighted with dialogue or quests, but they resonate deeply with players who stumble upon them. They remind us that the apocalypse wasn't abstract, it was lived and lost by countless individuals. Bethesda's developers also left behind hidden Easter eggs for sharp-eyed players. In the Cambridge Polymer Labs, names on employee terminals reference real members of the development team. In other locations, obscure graffiti includes initials or coded jokes tied to the designers. These Easter eggs don't break immersion. Instead, they reinforce the sense that Fallout's world is layered, with both in-universe history and playful nods from the people who built it. Abandoned terminals often hold surprising details. At first glance, they may appear to be filler, with scraps of information about employee rosters or inventory logs. But reading closely can reveal fascinating lore. In one factory, terminals describe employees stealing parts or slacking off, painting a picture of pre-war corporate corruption. In another, logs chronicle an outbreak of disease that foreshadowed the collapse of the community. Because these terminals are optional and easily ignored, many players miss the deeper stories hiding inside them. The Massachusetts State House offers one of Fallout 4's most obscure pieces of environmental storytelling. In its basement, a skeleton sits at a table with a bottle of wine and a pistol, surrounded by antique furniture. There's no quest tied to it, no explanation, just a quiet, haunting tableau. Players have speculated that it represents a politician who chose to end their life rather than face the post-war world. The scene is ambiguous, left for interpretation, but its placement suggests deliberate intent by the designers to create a moment of reflection amid the chaos of exploration. Hidden developer jokes also appear in locations like the Pickman Gallery, a twisted lair belonging to a serial killer. The blood-soaked paintings on the walls tell a grotesque story, but looking closely reveals that some of the brushstrokes form subtle initials or shapes, almost like signatures. This detail is never acknowledged in-game, but it highlights how much thought was put into even the smallest environments. Bethesda's artists use the Commonwealth not just as a setting, but as a canvas. Obscure graffiti sometimes references broader Fallout lore. Phrases like, "The Institute is watching," or "Railroad Safe House," pop up in unexpected alleys and tunnels. In one hidden area, a crude drawing depicts a figure with glowing eyes, possibly referencing synth paranoia. These details aren't part of any quest, but they immerse players in the fear and rumors that circulate among the wasteland's survivors. They also encourage exploration. Following a spray-painted arrow may lead to a hidden stash, rewarding the curious. Even small objects tell stories. A chessboard knocked over with pieces scattered across the floor suggests a game interrupted by disaster. A pair of boots beside a collapsed sleeping bag hints at a traveler who never woke up. These micro-narratives are so easy to miss, but they add richness to Fallout 4's world. They turn the Commonwealth into more than a backdrop. It becomes a record of thousands of individual lives, frozen at the moment the bombs fell or cut short in the years afterward. What makes these environmental details so powerful is their subtlety. Fallout 4 doesn't always highlight them with quest markers or glowing objectives. Instead, they exist quietly, waiting for the kind of player who explores every drawer, every rooftop, every corner of the map. For those who slow down, the Commonwealth reveals itself not just as a wasteland, but as a museum of stories told in graffiti, skeletons, and the placement of forgotten objects. These obscure details are what transform Fallout 4 from a game into a world one that feels haunted, lived in, and endlessly worth revisiting. The Commonwealth may feel familiar after dozens of hours, but Fallout 4 is filled with encounters that are so rare or so well hidden that many players never stumble across them. These events often happen without warning, tied to specific locations, random triggers, or obscure conditions. They are the kinds of moments that make Fallout 4 endlessly replayable quiet reminders that the wasteland always has another secret waiting around the corner. One of the most infamous hidden encounters is Swan, the massive super mutant behemoth lurking in Boston Common. At first, the location appears peaceful, a small pond with a swan boat floating in the water. But step too close, and the water erupts as Swan bursts from the depths, wielding a massive anchor as a weapon. The fight is brutal, often overwhelming players who aren't prepared. Many wanderers pass by the area without triggering him, never realizing that one of the Commonwealth's most dangerous enemies sleeps just beneath the surface. Another rare event is the UFO crash. At some point after reaching level 20, players may notice a fireball streaking across the sky, followed by a trail of smoke. If they investigate the crash site in the forest near Oberlin Station, they find a wrecked alien craft burning in the trees. Following a blood trail through the woods leads to a hidden cave where a wounded alien hides, armed with a unique alien blaster pistol. This event is so easy to miss. The crash only triggers once, and if you're not looking up at the right moment, you may never know it happened. For those who discover it, the encounter is one of Fallout 4's most surreal and memorable. Fallout 4 is also filled with random legendary enemies that appear in unexpected places. While many players encounter legendary raiders or ghouls, some locations hide particularly rare variants. Quarry Junction-style Deathclaw nests aren't as common as in New Vegas, but legendary Deathclaws can still appear near the glowing sea, turning exploration into a deadly surprise. Mirelurk Queens spawn only in specific conditions, most famously at Castle during the Minutemen questline, but occasionally in the wild, catching players off guard. These rare spawns ensure that even familiar regions can suddenly become battlegrounds. There are also strange random encounters that tell miniature stories. For example, a wandering pair of robots may appear, one a Mr. Handy reciting poetry, the other a Protectron acting as his audience. Raiders disguised as traders sometimes trick unwary players, springing ambushes if approached. You might even encounter settlers building a shack in real time, hammering away at wood and nails, a glimpse of life returning to the wasteland. These encounters don't always repeat, making them easy to miss, but they bring unpredictability to every journey. A particularly obscure event involves the traveling salesman named Doc Anderson. She appears randomly at settlements, offering medical services and rare items. If players recruit her through dialogue, she can permanently move into one of their settlements, effectively becoming one of the most valuable vendors in the game. But because her appearances are tied to random triggers, many players never even meet her, let alone realize she can join their community. For those who do, she becomes a hidden gem of settlement life. The glowing sea is home to its own obscure encounters. Beyond the main quest, the area hides small caves and ruins populated by feral ghouls, deathclaws, and remnants of cultists. One of the strangest locations is the Sentinel Site, a pre-war nuclear missile bunker filled with eerie terminals and propaganda. While it ties into the Children of Adam's lore, it's easy to miss entirely, as few players fully explore the glowing sea after completing their main objectives there. Even Boston's urban core hides surprises. In an alleyway near Trinity Tower, players may encounter a group of raiders fighting off a Deathclaw, an unscripted battle that can go either way depending on when the player arrives. In other cases, gunners clash with Brotherhood patrols or super mutants raid caravans, and the player can choose whether to intervene or simply watch the chaos unfold. These unscripted skirmishes give the Commonwealth a sense of ongoing conflict, as if the world exists even when the player isn't looking. One of the rarest companion-related encounters involves Curie. If you take her to Good Neighbor and introduce her to Dr. Amari after her body transfer quest, she has hidden dialogue with Hancock that few players ever hear. Similarly, Nick Valentine has unique lines in Far Harbor that tie directly to his backstory, but only if you bring him to specific conversations. These aren't scripted as obvious quest beats. They're tucked away in conditional dialogue, making them feel like secrets only the most attentive players discover. Some of Fallout 4's encounters are deliberately absurd. A wandering bard dressed as a wasteland troubadour can sometimes appear, strumming a guitar and singing fragments of songs. A suicidal settler might run up to you, holding a live grenade, a bizarre and darkly comedic moment that echoes Fallout's twisted sense of humor. In rare cases, players can even encounter a cat wandering into a settlement and becoming a permanent resident, a tiny, easily overlooked slice of normalcy in a broken world. All of these rare encounters highlight Fallout 4's design philosophy. The world isn't just built for quests, it's built to feel alive. By tucking these events into obscure corners or tying them to random triggers, Bethesda ensures that no two playthroughs are identical. One player might face Swan early in their adventure, another might never see him at all. One might witness the UFO crash, while another misses it entirely. These secrets give Fallout 4 its staying power, ensuring that even years later, players can return to the Commonwealth and find something new waiting in the shadows. Fallout 4's wasteland feels empty without the hum of a radio in the background. The crackle of old speakers, the warmth of pre-war music, and the voices of eccentric DJs turn long walks across the Commonwealth into journeys with personality. Yet hidden beneath the playlists and chatter are obscure details that many players never hear. From unused tracks to rare broadcasts, Fallout 4's radios are filled with secrets waiting for careful listeners. Diamond City Radio is the most iconic station in the game, and it begins with one of Fallout's quirkiest DJs, Travis Miles. Nervous, awkward, and constantly second-guessing himself, Travis doesn't sound like the confident voice of Boston's central radio station. He stumbles through announcements, repeats himself, and awkwardly comments on the songs he plays. For many players, he's endearing, but what's easy to miss is how much hidden dialogue Travis has. Beyond his questline, where he gains confidence with the player's help, he has small variations in his broadcasts, depending on how far you progress in the story. These include comments about the sole survivor's deeds and updates about major factions, but they're subtle and easy to overlook if you don't keep the radio on. The Confidence Man quest itself reveals a rare piece of interactive storytelling, helping Travis gain courage, not only changes his personality, but alters his radio broadcasts permanently. Afterward, his lines shift from hesitant stammering to confident delivery, reflecting his growth. It's one of Fallout 4's few examples of a character evolving in real time, and it makes Diamond City Radio feel alive in a way players might not fully notice unless they listen closely, both before and after the quest. Obscure broadcasts also occur at specific story points. If you complete quests for the Brotherhood of Steel, Railroad, or Minutemen, Diamond City Radio occasionally reports on your actions. These reports are short, sometimes even a single line slipped between songs, but they add a sense of recognition. Many players miss them because they occur sporadically and aren't always repeated, but they're there to reward attentive listeners. Bethesda didn't need to add these small details, yet they make the Commonwealth feel more responsive. Good Neighbor also has its own radio station, though it's less prominent. Magnolia, the sultry singer at the third rail, performs songs that can be heard both in person and on the radio. Her tracks are fully voiced and beautifully performed, but many players only hear one or two during a casual visit. In fact, she has multiple songs, each with unique lyrics, and players who linger in Good Neighbor long enough can experience them all. Beyond that, Magnolia herself is romanceable, a hidden detail tied to dialogue that many miss entirely because it feels tucked away behind casual conversations. Another obscure piece of radio trivia lies in the unused content within Fallout 4's files. Data miners uncovered additional tracks and DJ lines that were recorded but never implemented. Some of these include alternate versions of Travis's broadcasts, possibly recorded to reflect even more branching outcomes in his character development. Others are scrapped announcements that referenced cut quests or features. These hidden recordings reveal how expansive Bethesda's original vision for the radio was, even if not all of it survived into the final game. One rare feature tied to the radio is the ability to hear distress signals across the Commonwealth. Scattered bunkers, military installations, and hidden locations broadcast weak radio signals that can only be picked up when nearby. Following the static can lead players to secret caches, minor storylines, or even hidden holotapes. One notable example is the Cambridge Police Station distress signal, which draws the player into the Brotherhood of Steel's first major quest line. Others are less obvious, tied to obscure ruins that many players pass by without ever investigating. These signals encourage exploration and reward curiosity with lore and loot. Another overlooked aspect of Fallout 4's radio is how it connects players to the pre-war world. Songs like Atom Bomb Baby, The Wanderer, and It's All Over But the Crying don't just fill space. They set a tone that juxtaposes cheerful melodies with grim surroundings. This dark irony has always been a hallmark of Fallout, but Fallout 4 adds layers by choosing tracks that subtly reference the game's themes. Uranium Fever nods to the dangers of unchecked science. Good Rockin' Tonight hints at hope and survival through music. These thematic ties often go unnoticed, but they reinforce Fallout's identity through sound. Diamond City Radio also contains a few quirky oddities. Occasionally, Travis makes offhand comments that break the fourth wall, joking about how strange the Commonwealth is, or how dangerous it must be to wander alone. Some lines reference obscure encounters, like the UFO crash or Swan, though the conditions for hearing them are rare. These fleeting remarks connect the radio more directly to the player's experience, making it feel like Travis is truly aware of the wasteland around him. Even settlement radios carry subtle details. By building a recruitment beacon, players create their own broadcasts, though the content is simple. What's obscure is that these radios actually interact with the larger game world. The stronger your beacon, the more settlers it attracts, and some settlers even mention hearing the signal. While the system isn't as elaborate as Diamond City Radio, it's a reminder that communication in the wasteland is never just background noise, it's survival. In the end, Fallout 4's radios are much more than playlists. They are windows into the game's world, offering commentary, recognition, and atmosphere. The obscure lines, hidden broadcasts, and unused tracks show just how much thought went into them, even if most players only hear the surface layer. For those who keep the radio on, the Commonwealth becomes more than a wasteland. It becomes a stage set to music, narrated by DJs who make the ruins feel just a little less lonely. Companions are the soul of Fallout 4. They fight alongside you, comment on your choices, and reveal pieces of themselves in conversations that most players only hear once. Yet tucked away in the game's systems are obscure details that make these characters even deeper. From rare affinity triggers to hidden dialogue conditions, Fallout 4's companions are filled with secrets that many wanderers of the Commonwealth never uncover. Nick Valentine, the synth detective with the trench coat and gravelly voice, has one of the richest collections of hidden reactions. He comments on many locations tied to his own history, especially if you bring him to Far Harbor, where his backstory connects directly to the story of another Valentine prototype. He also reacts to your actions with the Institute more strongly than most companions, often questioning your morality if you align with them. Few players experience all of Nick's lines, since they require specific conditions, but his quiet remarks weave a picture of a character haunted by both the past and the present. Curie offers another layer of hidden detail. After transferring into a synth body, she reacts with awe to simple experiences, the feeling of rain on her skin, the sight of the sun without the filter of metal casing, the ability to laugh naturally. These moments aren't tied to specific quests, but occur randomly while traveling. They're easy to miss, yet they reveal her transition from machine to human in deeply emotional ways. For those who spend enough time wandering with her, Curie becomes more than just a companion. She becomes a lens for rediscovering humanity. Codsworth, the faithful Mr. Handy robot, has his own set of obscure quirks. Beyond his well-known ability to say hundreds of player names, he also reacts to specific settlements and actions. For example, he occasionally makes witty remarks when the player builds luxurious settlement items, hinting at his lingering pre-war sensibilities. If you spend too much time stealing or murdering, Codsworth expresses disappointment in ways that other companions do not, reflecting his role as both caretaker and moral anchor. These subtle touches often go unnoticed because many players move on from him early, never realizing how much dialogue he carries. Piper Wright, the intrepid reporter, has affinity triggers tied to uncovering the truth and protecting the innocent. She approves when you question authority or expose corruption, but she has hidden disapproval lines when you act too much like the Institute or Brotherhood, factions she distrusts. If you romance her, she has unique lines about Diamond City and the dream of building a safer world for her younger sister Nat. These lines are obscure because they require specific dialogue choices and timing, but they reveal the heart of Piper's character, someone who survives not by brute force, but by conviction. Preston Garvey, despite his reputation for repetitive settlement quests, has hidden depth as well. If you betray the Minutemen or ally too closely with the Institute, he reacts with rare lines of disillusionment, questioning whether you truly care about the people of the Commonwealth. Many players never hear these because they stick to his settlement path or abandon him early, but they show that Preston isn't simply a quest machine. He is someone who carries the weight of leadership, struggling with hope in a hopeless world. Macready, the mercenary sharpshooter, brings obscure callbacks to Fallout 3, where he first appeared as a child in Little Lamplight. If you ask him about his past, he references those days, making him one of the few Fallout 4 companions with a direct connection to earlier games. His affinity system also reveals his mercenary morality. He likes practical, self-serving decisions, but hidden lines show his softer side when it comes to family, especially after he reveals his son's illness. These details turn him from a hired gun into a layered character, defined by both cynicism and love. Strong, the super mutant searching for the milk of human kindness, has hidden dialogue that is easy to miss. If you bring him to libraries or museums, he sometimes comments with confusion or wonder, reflecting his vague yearning for understanding. While his quest never fully resolves, these small lines suggest that Strong's search isn't literal but symbolic, a fumbling attempt to understand humanity itself. Many players dismiss him as comic relief, but for those who listen closely, his dialogue reveals a glimmer of depth. X688, the Institute Courser, embodies another layer of obscurity. He only becomes available late in the game, meaning fewer players recruit him as a long-term companion. Yet he has rare commentary about technology, security, and synth loyalty, providing insight into the Institute's mindset. If you side against the Institute while he's with you, he delivers biting remarks about betrayal. His lines reveal not just loyalty to the Institute, but an almost programmed disdain for outsiders, details many players never uncover simply because of when he becomes available. Even Dogmeat, though nonverbal, has obscure mechanics tied to hidden behavior. He can fetch items from specific spots, react to enemies by growling before they appear, and even interact with the world in ways no other companion can. For example, he's capable of finding caches or hidden stashes that other companions ignore. These quiet mechanics make him more than just a mascot. They make him a bridge between the player and the unseen details of the Commonwealth. All of these companion quirks highlight Fallout 4's attention to subtlety. While the main storylines give broad strokes of characterization, it's the obscure affinity triggers, hidden dialogue, and rare conditions that flesh out each companion into someone who feels real. These details reward patience and curiosity, encouraging players to travel with different companions across multiple playthroughs. No single run can reveal everything, but together they create a tapestry of voices and personalities that make the Commonwealth feel alive. For many players, companions are simply backup in combat, but for those who slow down and listen, they become guides to the world, mirrors of morality, and sometimes even family. Their obscure lines, tucked into rare situations, remind us that Fallout 4 is not just about the sole survivor's journey. It's about the chorus of characters who shape that journey in ways both obvious and hidden. The Commonwealth is a dangerous place, not only because of raiders and factions, but because of the many mutated creatures that lurk in its ruins, forests, and irradiated waters. Fallout 4 brought the wasteland's wildlife to life in ways no previous game had, filling Boston and its outskirts with predators, scavengers, and monsters that often tell their own hidden stories. Yet, within these encounters lie obscure details and little-known facts that many players never realize. even after dozens of hours exploring. One of the most famous creatures is the Deathclaw, and Fallout 4 introduces several unique encounters with them. Beyond scripted fights, like the one in Concord, when the Minutemen hand you power armor and a minigun, there are rare variants scattered across the map. The glowing Deathclaw, for example, is one of the most dangerous types, spawning in limited areas and unleashing devastating radiation attacks. Some players may never meet one, since their appearances are conditional and tied to higher levels. Others might stumble across a nest hidden in a quarry or cave, where skeletal remains and scattered items suggest how many victims fell before you. These environmental touches give each Deathclaw fight a story beyond the combat itself. Mirelurks are another signature menace, but Fallout 4 adds obscure twists to their design. Mirelurk kings, for example, stand upright like humanoid amphibians, their screeches capable of disorienting the player. Lore suggests they evolved from mutated salamanders rather than crabs, a detail buried in notes and loading screen hints. Mirelurk queens, towering over the battlefield, are tied to specific locations like Castle during the Minutemen questline, but they can also appear rarely in the wild, ambushing unsuspecting explorers who think they're safe near the water's edge. Many players never realize that her acid spit attack ignores most cover, making her one of the game's most uniquely challenging bosses. Rodstags, the two-headed deer that roam the Commonwealth's hills, may seem harmless compared to Deathclaws or Mirelurks, but they carry obscure details of their own. Their skeletal, mutated forms are rooted in Fallout's dark humor, a twisted reflection of New England's wildlife. While radstags often flee rather than fight, they can turn aggressive if cornered. Even more obscure is their role in crafting. Their meat provides unique buffs when cooked, something many players overlook because they see radstags as simple background fauna. Their presence adds depth to the illusion of a living ecosystem. Insects also become nightmarish in Fallout 4. Bloodbugs, grotesque mosquito mutations, drain health rapidly with their proboscis attacks. They sometimes appear in swarms, overwhelming unprepared players. What's obscure is that their design was influenced by real-world mosquito species from New England, giving them a regional authenticity that makes them even creepier. Bloatflies, with their exploding larva projectiles, carry subtle nods to Fallout 3 and New Vegas, but Fallout 4's version is more aggressive. These tiny details in their behavior reflect Bethesda's commitment to making every creature feel dangerous in its own unique way. The Glowing Sea, a region many players only explore for the main quest, hides some of Fallout 4's rarest and most obscure creature encounters. Deathclaws and radscorpions spawn here more frequently, but players who linger may also discover unique variations of feral ghouls, irradiated to the point of glowing. The environment itself acts like an enemy, with radiation storms and constant health drain, making even ordinary wildlife encounters far more dangerous. Because many players rush through the Glowing Sea to meet Virgil, they often miss its full spectrum of mutated inhabitants. Feral ghouls themselves carry obscure lore. Many players assume they are simply zombie-like enemies, but scattered holotapes and notes reveal their origins as humans who were irradiated yet survived. Some ghouls retain their minds, like Hancock or the traders you meet in the wasteland, but others lose themselves entirely, becoming feral. In Fallout 4, certain feral ghoul encounters are designed as environmental storytelling. A group clustered in an abandoned metro station, still wearing uniforms, suggests they were once commuters. Others, trapped in collapsed buildings or huddled near skeletons show that feral ghouls are not just enemies. They are the tragic remnants of Boston's population. Legendary variants of creatures also add an obscure layer. These enemies glow faintly and mutate mid-fight, regaining health and gaining new abilities. What's easy to miss is that legendary enemies scale with the player's level, meaning encounters that seem impossible early on become more manageable later. They also drop unique gear with randomized legendary effects, rewarding players who take on the risk. The mechanic itself is widely known, but the way it interacts with creature design, turning ordinary wildlife into deadly bosses, is an obscure system that shapes the player's survival. Some of Fallout 4's most obscure creatures are tied to specific locations. In the Boston Public Library, players can encounter a glowing mutant hound guarding the building, an enemy not found elsewhere. In the Museum of Witchcraft, a terrifying Deathclaw encounter is framed like a horror story, with eerie sounds leading up to the battle. In the depths of certain caves, albino rad scorpions wait in ambush, nearly invisible against the pale rock. These location-specific enemies often go unnoticed by players who never fully explore the Commonwealth's optional areas. Finally, Fallout 4 peppers its world with strange details about creature origins. The Institute's experiments created synth gorillas, though players only glimpse them briefly. Rumors in holotapes and terminals suggest other experiments with wildlife, hinting that some mutations might not be natural radiation, but engineered projects. Even the children of Adam, in their devotion to radiation, interpret glowing creatures as sacred signs, giving spiritual meaning to monsters most players see as threats. These subtle pieces of lore tie Fallout 4's ecosystem back into its broader themes of science, hubris, and survival. Together, these obscure creatures and details show that Fallout 4's wildlife is more than just filler combat. Each mutated animal, insect, and monster carries a story, whether it's the ecological role of radstags, the tragic origins of feral ghouls, or the terrifying ambush of a hidden Mirelurk queen. For those who explore deeply, the Commonwealth reveals itself not as a barren wasteland, but as a thriving, if twisted, ecosystem where every encounter has meaning. Settlements in Fallout 4 are one of the most debated features of the game. Some players fell in love with the system, building elaborate towns and fortresses across the Commonwealth. Others saw it as a distraction, tied to repetitive quests and constant settlement alerts. But hidden beneath the obvious mechanics are obscure details that most players never discover. Fallout 4's settlement system is richer, stranger, and more interconnected than it first appears. One of the least known features is how settlers respond to environmental design. Place chairs, beds, or instruments in certain areas, and settlers will actually use them, adding life to your town. A radio placed in a central hub causes settlers to gather nearby, sometimes even dancing when music plays. Cats, if adopted into settlements, roam freely, curling up in beds or wandering through workshops. These small touches aren't explained in tutorials, but they create moments of life that make settlements feel organic. Another obscure detail lies in the settlement happiness system. While the game provides a general happiness percentage, the mechanics behind it are surprisingly complex. Settlers gain or lose happiness based on food, water, defense, beds, and variety of resources. But hidden triggers also apply, giving settlers shops to work at boosts happiness significantly, while leaving crops unassigned can lower it. Players who dig into the system discover that happiness can climb past 80 or 90% only if every settler has a role and access to luxuries. Many casual players never realize why their happiness stalls, chalking it up to bugs rather than mechanics. Obscure settlement objects also exist across the Commonwealth. Some junk items, like mannequins or decorative skeletons, can be placed in settlements to create eerie or humorous scenes. Bethesda also scattered unique furniture pieces in certain areas. For example, the Institute's sleek white chairs or Vault-Tech's corporate desks that can be scrapped and rebuilt back at settlements. These rare assets allow dedicated builders to create settlements with distinct themes, though many players never notice they can harvest them from the world. The Provisioner system, where Brahmin caravans link settlements together, hides its own quirks. Brahmin don't just serve as decoration, they carry supplies that make resources available across linked towns. Obscurely, they also leave fertilizer at settlements, a resource many players overlook. Fertilizer is used in crafting certain explosives and in building garden plots, making Brahmin more valuable than they appear. These subtle mechanics tie into Fallout's theme of reusing and scavenging, rewarding players who notice the small details. Some settlers have unique hidden identities. The traveling doctor, Doc Anderson, and her companions, Holt Combs and Anne Hargraves, can all become settlers under the right conditions, bringing specialized skills to your community. Anne, for example, boosts settlement happiness when working as a merchant. Holt, tied to Vault 81, provides unique dialogue. These characters aren't highlighted, and many players never recruit them, missing out on the richness they bring to settlements. Obscure quirks also exist with defenses. Turrets and guard posts provide visible boosts, but the game also tracks line of sight and overlapping fields of fire. A turret placed on a roof overlooking crops is more effective than one hidden behind walls. Similarly, settlers assigned as guards will patrol routes, sometimes climbing towers or moving between posts. These behaviors are subtle and easy to miss, but create the illusion of a functioning defensive system. The game even includes rare settlement events. Raiders, super mutants, and gunners can attack settlements, but the way these events trigger is tied to hidden mechanics. The more settlements you own, the higher the chance of attacks, and the lower your defense rating, the more likely they are to succeed. Certain creatures, like Mirelurk queens, can appear in attacks if your settlement is near water. These rare invasions turn settlements into battlegrounds, though many players never experience them if they abandon the system early. Settlement building also contains Easter eggs. If you decorate a settlement heavily with Nuka-Cola memorabilia, settlers sometimes comment on it. Placing Vault-Tech decorations, such as posters or furniture, triggers unique dialogue about the company's past. These obscure responses show that the game tracks not only function, but also style, rewarding creative builders with small nods of recognition. Perhaps the most obscure aspect of settlement building is how it connects to Fallout 4's ending. If you invest heavily in the Minutemen, building strong settlements across the Commonwealth, the final ending slides reflect your efforts. Towns flourish, caravans connect regions, and the Minutemen rise as a symbol of hope. If you ignore settlements, the endings feel emptier, showing scattered survivors without unity. Bethesda designed settlements not just as a side feature, but as a potential backbone of the sole survivor's legacy. Many players never realize how much their settlement choices shape the story's final tone. Modders later expanded on these systems, uncovering just how much was hidden in the code. They revealed unused settlement objects, unfinished events, and cut mechanics like settler rivalries and resource disputes. These discoveries show that Fallout 4's settlement system was originally even more ambitious. What remains is still filled with obscure depth, but it hints at a larger vision of rebuilding civilization that never fully made it into the finished game. In the end, settlements represent Fallout 4's theme of reclamation. The wasteland is filled with ruins and reminders of the old world, but in settlements, players can create something new. The obscure details, cats curling up in beds, settlers dancing to radios, Brahmin leaving fertilizer, rare NPCs joining as specialists, transform the system from simple mechanics into quiet stories of survival. For those who take the time to notice, settlements aren't just chores, they are living communities filled with secrets that make the Commonwealth feel just a little more alive. Fallout 4's crafting system was one of its biggest changes from earlier games, allowing players to break down junk and rebuild it into powerful weapons and armor. At first glance, it seems straightforward. Upgrade damage, improve accuracy, or slap a scope on a rifle. But buried within the system are obscure details that many players never notice. From hidden legendary effects to rare crafting quirks, the Commonwealth's workbenches are full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. One of the most obscure mechanics lies in legendary weapons. When enemies drop gear with legendary effects, the names and bonuses are randomized from a pool of possibilities. Most players recognize staples like instigating, which doubles damage on the first hit, or two-shot, which fires an extra projectile. But lesser-known effects exist, such as explosive, which causes bullets to detonate on impact, or sentinels, which reduces damage taken while standing still. These effects can turn ordinary weapons into devastating tools, yet many players only encounter them by chance, never realizing how wide the pool of possibilities is. Some legendary effects even behave differently than players expect. The wounding effect, for example, applies bleeding damage over time, but this damage stacks with each shot, making rapid-fire weapons with this effect absurdly powerful. Similarly, explosive damage scales with perks in ways that can break balance, leading some fans to call it one of the most overpowered effects in the game. Unless players experiment heavily, these quirks remain obscure, hidden behind Fallout 4's layers of systems. Armor carries its own set of secrets. While power armor is the obvious highlight, standard armor pieces can also roll legendary effects. Chameleon armor, which turns the player invisible when crouched and stationary, is one of the rarest and easiest to miss. Cloaking armor shocks nearby enemies when the player takes melee damage, an effect rarely seen outside of legendary drops. Some effects even mimic perks, like powered armor, which regenerates action points faster. For players who explore thoroughly and defeat legendary enemies, armor can transform into something far beyond its base stats. The power armor system itself hides obscure mechanics. Each suit has its own model, from the rusty T-45 to the advanced X1, but players often don't realize that individual pieces can be mixed and matched. Wearing a full set of mismatched parts not only creates unique looks, but also combines different durability levels. Even more obscure is the hidden damage resistance applied to power armor frames themselves. Even without pieces equipped, the frame alone provides significant protection. This detail makes frames valuable even in their bare state, something many players overlook when they strip them for parts. Customizing power armor unlocks further secrets. Rare paint jobs tied to factions, like the Brotherhood of Steel or Atom Cats, provide small stat bonuses in addition to cosmetic flair. The Minutemen paint job, for instance, boost charisma when all pieces are painted. Obscure materials like lead can be added to armor pieces for radiation resistance, a hidden layer of defense that proves vital in places like the glowing sea. Many players never explore these modifications fully, focusing only on raw damage resistance instead of experimenting with special effects. Weapons hide similar surprises. For example, the railway rifle, one of Fallout 4's most unique weapons, fires railway spikes that pin enemies to walls. But what's obscure is that the spikes can be retrieved after battle, reducing ammo scarcity. The Syringer rifle allows players to craft specialized ammo types that inflict unique status effects, from frenzy to reduced damage resistance. Many dismiss the Syringer as a novelty, never realizing its potential in crowd control or stealth play. These weapon-specific quirks reward players who experiment beyond the conventional guns. Crafting itself holds secrets in how materials are used. Adhesive, often scarce early in the game, becomes one of the most valuable resources because nearly every weapon and armor mod requires it. What many players don't know is that farming adhesive is possible by crafting vegetable starch at cooking stations, turning crops like corn, mutfruit, and tatos into a renewable supply. This mechanic, tucked away in settlement farming, quietly links crafting to the broader survival loop. Players who miss it often find themselves constantly scavenging duct tape and wonder why mods feel so resource hungry. Another obscure feature involves junk items themselves. While the game highlights which components junk breaks down into, some objects carry hidden value. Desk fans, for example, provide screws, one of the rarer crafting components. Typewriters yield gears and springs. Hot plates offer circuitry. Knowing which junk to prioritize becomes an art form, and experienced players often memorize the most valuable items. Bethesda even tucked in Easter eggs. Certain pre-war toys, like toy aliens, break down into unexpected materials, adding a touch of humor to scavenging. Armor mods also interact with perks in subtle ways. Deep-pocketed armor, for instance, increases carrying capacity, stacking with the strong back perk and power armor bonuses. Polymer upgrades boost defense far more than standard leather or metal improvements, but they require rare crafting components that many players never stockpile. Some mods, like shadowed armor, improve stealth in dark areas, though this effect isn't clearly explained in-game. These mechanics reward players who test combinations, uncovering advantages that casual players might never notice. One of the rarest obscure details is how weapon names change when modded. Adding specific barrels, stocks, or receivers often renames a weapon to reflect its new design. For example, turning a basic pipe rifle into a pipe sniper rifle. Legendary effects add yet another layer, resulting in long descriptive names that reflect the exact build. This naming system is often overlooked, but shows Bethesda's attention to immersion, making every weapon feel distinct. Together, these obscure mechanics transform Fallout 4's crafting into more than a simple upgrade system. Hidden legendary effects, rare armor mods, resource quirks, and unexpected junk values all create a deeper layer of survival. For players who look closely, the Commonwealth's workbenches aren't just functional, they are puzzle boxes filled with secrets that reward curiosity and experimentation. Even years after release, Fallout 4 continues to surprise players who thought they knew everything, revealing new synergies and obscure tricks hidden within its crafting system. The Commonwealth is dense with landmarks, from the glowing ruins of Boston to the swamps and rocky hills beyond. Yet some of Fallout 4's most fascinating spaces are not tied to quests at all. They are hidden basements, eerie cellars, forgotten offices, or developer crafted secrets that players can walk right past without ever realizing they exist. These obscure locations enrich the game world, offering atmosphere, lore, or sometimes just a strange joke waiting to be uncovered. One such hidden gem is the Kendall Hospital basement. While most players explore the hospital during quests, very few find the underground area with its locked doors and unsettling decor. Inside, skeletons sit in strange arrangements as though experiments or rituals took place. There is no quest marker, no explanation, just a dark slice of storytelling that leaves players to imagine what happened. These moments of mystery are what make Fallout 4's Commonwealth feel like a world of secrets. Another obscure area is the Pikmin Gallery, a location most players stumble into by accident. At first, it appears to be a raider hideout, but exploring further reveals a horrifying lair filled with grotesque paintings and bodies displayed as art. The gallery's creator, Pikmin, is a serial killer loosely inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's short story, Pikmin's Model. The game never forces players to explore every room, but doing so reveals subtle environmental storytelling, blood splattered on canvases, sculptures built from bones that show how far Fallout leans into dark horror when no one is looking. One of the eeriest hidden areas lies beneath the Mass Pike interchange. Among the wreckage of collapsed highways, players can find an unmarked cellar with evidence of cannibalism, tables set with human remains, knives laid out as though preparing for a feast. Raiders and gunners occupy much of the Commonwealth, but this particular cellar has no explicit backstory, making it all the more unsettling. It is simply a fragment of horror left for curious wanderers to discover. The Cabot House also holds obscure secrets. While the main questline introduces the strange and immortal Cabot family, many players never fully explore their mansion. Hidden rooms contain diaries, artifacts, and scientific notes that add depth to the family's backstory. Even more obscure is Lorenzo Cabot's cell beneath Parsons State Insane Asylum. While the quest explains his imprisonment, players who linger in the area after the quest is complete can still find environmental clues about the experiments carried out on him. These small touches expand the lore in ways that go unnoticed if players rush through. Boston's underground offers some of the most obscure locations. The collapsed metro system is filled with half-explored tunnels, many of which don't serve any quest purpose. Some tunnels end abruptly in collapsed rubble, while others open into small chambers where skeletons rest around campfires, as though survivors once lived there. In certain corners, graffiti and strange markings appear, hinting at scavenger cultures that used these tunnels long after the bombs fell. These abandoned spaces tell stories without words, rewarding players who follow every side path. One of Fallout 4's strangest unmarked locations is the Hallucinogen Inc. facility. Most players encounter it briefly during a Brotherhood or miscellaneous quest, but the building contains layers of hidden detail. Experimental gas chambers still function, filling rooms with hallucinogenic mist that sends enemies into violent frenzies. If players read through terminals, they discover the company's disturbing experiments on civilians and soldiers, testing chemical agents for war. It's easy to fight through without stopping to investigate, but those who pause realize Hallucinogen reflects Fallout's satire of reckless pre-war science at its darkest. The glowing sea hides several obscure spots beyond the main questline. Among them is the wreckage of a crashed plane scattered across the irradiated wasteland, Skeletons lie in the wreck, suggesting passengers who never escaped when the bombs fell. Another eerie location is the decayed ruins of a church, its steeple jutting out of the irradiated fog like a ghost. These sites aren't tied to any missions, but they create a haunting atmosphere, reinforcing the glowing sea's role as a graveyard of forgotten stories. Another obscure find is the skeleton of a giant, long-dead creature near the Museum of Witchcraft. Many speculate it's an untextured or scrapped model of a behemoth or mutant, but its presence remains unexplained. Bethesda sometimes places these oddities deliberately, as if to suggest the Commonwealth holds mysteries even beyond the player's understanding. Players who stumble upon it often share the discovery online, debating whether it was intentional or a glitch left as a secret for explorers. Even inside Diamond City, obscure spaces exist. Beneath the stands, certain locked doors lead to storage areas filled with pre-war memorabilia, baseball bats, old uniforms, and even unopened bottles of Nuka-Cola. These rooms serve no direct quest purpose, but enrich Diamond City's identity as a settlement built on sports nostalgia. Similarly, the Dugout Inn hides small items tied to the lives of Vadim and Yefim, its quirky ghoul owners. By reading notes and paying attention, players can glimpse their struggles and humor beyond what's shown in dialogue. Perhaps the strangest obscure location is Fallout 4's developer test room. Using console commands on PC, players can teleport into an area filled with every item, weapon, armor piece, and consumable in the game, all neatly organized in containers. The room was never intended for exploration by players, but it stands as a reminder of the hidden underpinnings of game design. For some, discovering it feels like finding a vault behind the vaults, a secret space where the logic of the game's world breaks, and every tool of survival is laid bare. All of these obscure places show how Fallout 4 isn't just about quests and storylines. It's about exploration, curiosity, and the reward of noticing what others overlook. From basements filled with horror to developer Easter eggs, the Commonwealth is stitched together not just by its major landmarks, but by its forgotten corners. For those who slow down and peer into every crack, Fallout 4 reveals itself as a world that is always deeper, always stranger, and always waiting to surprise. Bethesda has always enjoyed layering Fallout games with nods to movies, books, and cultural touchstones, and Fallout 4 is no exception. Beneath the grim surface of the Commonwealth, the developers tucked away sly references to science fiction, horror, and even their own studio's history. Many of these Easter eggs are obscure, requiring exploration, curiosity, or simply a sharp eye to notice. For players who stumble across them, they provide moments of humor, nostalgia, and recognition amid the wasteland's darkness. One of the most famous pop culture nods lies in the Museum of Witchcraft. Inside, eerie sounds echo through the halls, creating a horror atmosphere that feels straight out of Alien. The source turns out to be a deathclaw, but the environmental design, blood-smeared walls, ominous growls, and claustrophobic corridors mirrors Ridley Scott's sci-fi classic. This isn't accidental. Bethesda crafted the scene as a love letter to creature feature horror, rewarding players with a cinematic moment that feels familiar even in Fallout's world. Blade Runner also gets a subtle reference in Fallout 4. In Diamond City, a quest called The Replicated Man returns from Fallout 3, though it's mostly hidden through terminals and small lore details. The quest touches on the theme of synths searching for identity, echoing the replicants of Ridley Scott's film. Players who explore deeply enough uncover hints that tie Fallout's synths to the broader cultural conversation about humanity, technology, and free will. It's a quiet nod, one that connects Fallout's themes to some of the most influential sci-fi ever created. Another obscure nod is found at the crashed UFO site. While the encounter itself is surreal, the alien blaster pistol is a reference to the long-running trope of alien weaponry in pulp sci-fi. Its design mirrors ray guns seen in 1950s comics and movies, deliberately campy in contrast to Fallout's grittier weapons. By hiding it behind a rare random event, Bethesda made this Easter egg feel like stumbling into a lost piece of vintage science fiction tucked away in the woods of Massachusetts. In Concord, early in the game, the player can pick up Grognak the Barbarian comics, a series that has run through the Fallout franchise. Grognak himself is a parody of Conan the Barbarian, and Fallout 4 expands this with a collectible costume hidden in Hubris Comics. The location itself is a shrine to pulp heroes, filled with posters and memorabilia that echo mid-20th century pop culture. The obscurity lies not in Grognak's presence, but in the layers of parody and homage hidden in the building a museum of fiction within Fallout's fiction. There's also a nod to Terminator 2, Judgment Day in the robotics disposal ground. Among the piles of destroyed machines is a Protectron, posed eerily like the T-800 sinking into molten steel at the end of the film, one hand raised in a thumbs up. It's easy to miss if you're not looking closely, but for those who recognize it, it's one of Fallout 4's cheekiest Easter eggs. These kinds of visual jokes show Bethesda's love for slipping pop culture into unexpected places. Fallout 4 also tips its hat to Stephen King. In a sewer system beneath Boston, graffiti references it with the words, "You'll float too," scrawled ominously on the wall. The sewer itself is unsettling, filled with creepy sounds and environmental cues. While no clown emerges to haunt the player, the nod is unmistakable, rooting Fallout's horror elements in the real-world literary tradition of American horror. Players who wander into this obscure corner find themselves in a moment that feels more King than Bethesda, a crossover of fiction and game. Pop culture references even extend to loot. The junk jet, a weapon that allows players to fire random junk items as ammunition, contains a nod to the film Mystery Men. Its absurdity shooting teddy bears, typewriters, or coffee cups at enemies mirrors the film's campy take on unconventional superheroes. While Fallout has always embraced humor, the junk jet is a particularly obscure example of how Bethesda ties gameplay mechanics to broader cultural jokes. Fallout 4 also includes nods to Bethesda's own history. In certain terminals and graffiti, names of developers appear, often disguised as pre-war employees or scavengers. A particular skeleton in a bathtub holding a bottle of wine has been linked by some fans to a developer's inside joke, though Bethesda has never confirmed it. These self-referential touches blur the line between in-game lore and real-world creators, a wink to players who know where to look. One of the most playful Easter eggs involves vault tech. Across the Commonwealth, scattered advertisements, posters, and billboards echo real-world marketing campaigns of the 1950s. The slogans, cheerful, exaggerated, and sinister when read closely, are parodies of post-war American consumerism. Many players overlook these posters as background art, but together they form a biting commentary on blind trust in corporations and government. The parody is so sharp that it works as both Fallout lore and cultural satire of the world that inspired it. Even Diamond City carries its obscure cultural nods. The baseball references that define the settlement are more than just flavor, they parody America's tendency to mythologize its past. Merchants in the city hilariously misinterpret the sport, describing it as a brutal gladiatorial game rather than a pastime. This satirical twist is an Easter egg in itself, mocking how cultural memory distorts history, especially after catastrophe. It's easy to laugh at, but it's also a thoughtful commentary on how civilizations reframe their past. Together, these pop culture Easter eggs and references show that Fallout 4 is as much a cultural mirror as it is a post-apocalyptic RPG. Whether it's a swan boat hiding a behemoth, a sewer whispering Stephen King, or a Protectron giving a Terminator thumbs up, the Commonwealth is filled with winks to the world outside the game. For players who notice them, they're more than jokes, they're connections, threads linking Fallout's world to ours, reminding us that even in the darkest wasteland, humor and culture endure. Fallout 4's quests define much of the player's experience, but what many don't realize is just how many small branches, hidden outcomes, and rare interactions exist beneath the surface. Some are cut or underdeveloped. Others are obscure checks hidden behind specific stats or companions, and many go unnoticed because players rarely replay the same quest with different choices. Fallout 4 may not have the same level of branching as New Vegas, but it still hides a surprising number of quest secrets that only the most curious players uncover. One of the most famous is the quest, the Silver Shroud. Most players know that wearing the Silver Shroud costume during the quest unlocks dramatic dialogue options, but what's obscure is how far this effect carries. If you continue wearing the costume in unrelated quests, some NPCs recognize it, triggering unique dialogue. Even after the main quest ends, you can still roleplay as the Shroud, responding with campy one-liners in certain conversations. The quest is also one of the few where killing or sparing targets changes not only the outcome, but how the Commonwealth perceives your vigilante persona. The Minutemen quests also hold obscure variations. In Taking Independence, the assault on Castle usually ends with the Mirelurk Queen emerging from the water. But if you arrive with high-level weapons or power armor, the difficulty scaling changes the number and type of enemies in subtle ways. Later, when defending Castle in Defend the Castle, rare dialogue triggers if you've heavily invested in settlements. Settlers comment on your preparedness, and Minutemen morale is noticeably higher. These details don't alter the story in dramatic ways, but they make the quest feel more responsive to your playstyle. The Big Dig, a quest involving Good Neighbors Mayor Hancock and the ghoul named Bobby No-Nose, hides rare outcomes depending on who you side with. If you betray Bobby and side with Hancock's allies, he approves and your relationship with him improves. But if you stick with Bobby, you get unique dialogue from Hancock expressing disappointment, something many players miss because siding with him feels like the obvious choice. Even more obscure, there are lines from Bobby that hint at cut content, suggesting she might once have had a larger role in the city's politics. Another quest with hidden layers is Confidence Man, where you help Diamond City Radio's DJ Travis gain self-esteem. The main beats are visible, but obscure lines of dialogue change depending on how you handle the bar fight and whether you encourage Travis gently or aggressively. The final stage, where Travis rescues Vadim, can also vary depending on your approach, with rare companion interjections if you bring Piper or Preston along. These tiny differences make the quest feel alive, even though most players only experience one version. Even settlement quests carry obscure outcomes. While Preston's "Another Settlement Needs Our Help" line became a meme, if you consistently ignore these radiant quests, rare dialogue from settlers shows frustration. Some settlements become visibly less organized, with crops unassigned and defenses weakened. Though subtle, these outcomes show that even repetitive quests carry hidden consequences if neglected too long. Many players never notice because they either dive into settlement building or ignore it entirely. The Institute's questline contains one of Fallout 4's most obscure moral checks. If you bring Nick Valentine into conversations with Institute scientists, he reacts bitterly, questioning their experiments and reflecting on his own identity as a synth. These reactions don't change the quest outcome, but they deepen the emotional weight of siding with the Institute. Similarly, if you side against the Institute but bring X688, he comments with rare lines of loyalty, criticizing your betrayal. These companion-triggered outcomes highlight how much the game rewards specific combinations of choices. Human error, the quest tied to Covenant, is another rich source of obscure outcomes. The surface-level story involves uncovering the town's dark secret. Its residents capture suspected synths and subject them to brutal tests. Most players resolve it by siding with Honest Dan and rescuing Amelia Stockton, but you can also side with Covenant, exposing Amelia as a synth and allowing the town to continue its experiments. Few players choose this path, making it one of Fallout 4's darkest branches. Even rarer is dialogue from Amelia herself if you question her closely, which leaves her identity ambiguous. The Far Harbor expansion continues this pattern with its branching quests. Best Left Forgotten, where you infiltrate Dima's memories, contains obscure outcomes depending on whether you reveal his secrets or protect them. Some companions react strongly, with Nick Valentine delivering rare lines that tie back to his prototype origins. Even more obscure are the small changes in faction relationships. Depending on your choices, details many players never realize because they expect binary outcomes. Nuka World also hides rare quest interactions. If you choose to betray the raiders and side with the Commonwealth instead, certain raider bosses react with unique dialogue before turning hostile. Conversely, if you embrace the raider life, companions like Preston outright refuse to travel with you. These outcomes are easy to miss because many players never replay Nuka World with opposite choices. The obscure dialogue tucked into these branches reveals Bethesda's effort to make raiders more than faceless enemies, at least for a while. Even Radiant quests sometimes contain Easter eggs. A rare one involves rescuing settlers from a random location, where the hostages occasionally reference other quests or even comment on the sole survivor's reputation. These lines appear so infrequently that many players assume Radiant quests are identical, but hidden variety exists. They're small flourishes, the kind Bethesda adds for players who repeat the game enough to notice the subtle changes. Together, these obscure quest outcomes show that Fallout 4 is more flexible than it appears at first glance. While its dialogue wheel limited some choices, the game still hides dozens of alternate paths, rare companion lines, and moral branches for players willing to experiment, to side with the unpopular choice, to bring different companions, to fail instead of succeed. The Commonwealth reveals new layers. The quests may look familiar, but their secrets are scattered in the margins, waiting for those who dig deeper to discover them. Fallout 4, like every massive open-world game, contains layers of content that never made it to the final release. Some of these pieces exist only as fragments buried in the game's files, while others survive as half-finished locations, unused dialogue, or mechanics that were quietly abandoned during development. For players who dig into the code or simply stumble upon oddities while exploring, these cut elements reveal a ghostly version of Fallout 4 that might have been a parallel Commonwealth just beneath the one we know. One of the most striking discoveries lies in the game's dialogue files. Fallout 4 contains thousands of unused lines, many fully voiced by actors, but never implemented. Nick Valentine, for instance, has recorded lines that expand on his backstory and his prototype connections to the Institute. Some of these tie directly into Far Harbor's themes, suggesting that Bethesda once planned for his arc to be larger in the base game. Similarly, Piper has unused dialogue reacting to quests and factions in ways that never appear, hinting at cut branches of the main story. Companions in general were meant to have more depth. Codsworth has extra recognition names beyond the hundreds he already has that were cut for reasons unknown. Strong has lines elaborating on his search for the milk of human kindness, suggesting a resolution that never appears in the final game. Even Dogmeat has cut behaviors, including the ability to retrieve specific quest-related items on command. These leftovers show that companions were once envisioned as even richer, with more dynamic interaction woven into the Commonwealth. Quests also reveal a shadow world of cut content. Data miners uncovered evidence of a questline involving the Institute's robotics division, where players would oversee synth production and possibly make decisions about their programming. Dialogue fragments suggest debates between scientists about free will and obedience, echoing themes later explored in Far Harbor. Another scrapped quest appears to have involved the Railroad dealing with internal betrayals, with NPCs who would defect under certain conditions. These arcs would have added more political depth, but they were stripped down before release. Even settlements had features that never fully emerged. Notes in the code indicate that settlers were once meant to have rivalries, forming cliques, or feuding with each other if left unmanaged. Resource scarcity might have sparked disputes, forcing the player to mediate. Another cut feature involved settlement expansion, where towns would grow beyond their borders over time, creating sprawling communities. Instead, settlements remained static, leaving modders to later expand them into the ambitious systems Bethesda originally teased. Locations throughout the Commonwealth contain strange leftovers that hint at abandoned quests. In Hyde Park, a raider settlement, terminals reference plans for more complex interactions with raider bosses. The Milton General Hospital contains unused assets for medical experiments, possibly once tied to a quest about pre-war bioweapons. Even the Institute itself has locked rooms and unfinished labs that serve no purpose, as if larger storylines were trimmed late in development. Players who stumble upon these spaces often feel they've found a secret, when in reality, they're wandering into ghosts of abandoned content. The glowing sea holds its own mysteries. Cut dialogue suggests that Bethesda planned more encounters there, including additional Children of Adam rituals and unique mutated creatures. Some data files even reference a scrapped type of feral ghoul meant to appear only in the glowing sea, glowing more brightly and dealing radiation damage over time. Without them, the area still feels dangerous, but the files hint at an even more surreal nightmare that was never realized. Weapons and armor carry hidden remnants as well. Fallout 4's files contain unfinished models for energy weapons that never appear, including variations of the plasma caster from Fallout New Vegas. Certain armor mods reference stats that don't exist in the final game, suggesting Bethesda experimented with systems like durability or overheating. Even holotape games had cut versions, with partial code for extra minigames that never made it into the Pip-Boy. These small traces remind us that every system in Fallout 4 could have been deeper, but time and practicality forced Bethesda to trim. One of the strangest leftovers involves the player's voiced protagonist. Early files suggest that multiple branching dialogue options were recorded, many of which never appear in the final game. These include sarcastic responses, harsher tones of voice, and alternative lines that would have offered greater nuance in conversations. Critics often noted Fallout 4's limited dialogue wheel, and the cut lines show that Bethesda once considered a broader range of player expression before narrowing it down. Developers even left behind test cells, small rooms used internally to test mechanics. Accessible only through console commands, these spaces contain every item in the game, dummies for NPC behavior, and markers for testing dialogue triggers. For players who uncover them, they feel like stepping behind the curtain into Bethesda's workshop. While not meant for exploration, they stand as reminders of how much invisible work underpins the Commonwealth. What makes these cut elements fascinating is how they mirror Fallout's themes. Just as the wasteland is filled with ruins of the old world, Fallout 4 itself is filled with ruins of design ideas, abandoned quests, forgotten dialogue, half-finished systems. They linger in the code like skeletons in a collapsed metro, silent but suggestive. For players who seek them out, they add another layer of mystery to the game, making the Commonwealth feel not only like a post-apocalyptic landscape, but like a living artifact of game development itself. In the end, Fallout 4's cut content reminds us that no game is ever truly complete. There is always more planned than can be delivered, always experiments that don't survive the journey to release. But for those who uncover the leftovers, whether through exploration or data mining, the Commonwealth becomes larger, stranger, and richer. It's not just the game we play, it's the shadow of the game that might have been haunting the ruins of the one that exists.